Thank you once again. My name's Sarah Sivyer. As Nigel said, I'm from the Hunter Valley in New South Wales. Today I'm going to talk to you not about the topic that's in the pamphlet. So if you're thinking it's about that, my apologies. I've actually refined it a little. It's called Small Giants, Businesses with a Passion for Excellence. The title is completely stolen from a brilliant book by Bo Burlingham. If you haven't read it, and you enjoy elements of what we're going to talk about now, then I'd recommend reading it. Bo looks at businesses that choose to be great rather than big, in the US in particular. And when those businesses come up against tough questions like, do they scale or do they franchise? Why some of these have opted against that? And there are a couple of food and farming businesses in the mix. Before I begin, I really have to have a massive shout out to the Department of Primary Industries in New South Wales. In particular, thank you, Alex, for being here today. It's great to have you here. In particular, the Young Farmer Business Program. I think we heard a lot about it this morning with regards to financial literacy for young farmers and things like that. New South Wales DPI have kicked off a great program around financial literacy, in particular around getting young farmers bank ready, being business savvy enough to go and ask the bank those questions and being happy enough to walk away and say, hey, I've still got a bit of work to do, but DPI are working on how those farmers can be set up for success. I'm an egg farmer. I'm actually a pasture-raised chicken farmer. Today, we're not really going to talk about, well, I'm not going to talk about eggs, but the reason I suppose I've put a little bit up there about my business is called Just Been Laid. Thank you, Toby. Yeah, my mum still doesn't let anyone know what I do for a living. But it's pasture-raised eggs, and with that, it's the important piece for me was setting up a business model that hopefully would create a predictable cash flow for me. And by that I mean we get paid $12 a dozen for our eggs. We go direct to customer, and we get paid in advance of the eggs themselves being laid. So, for example, if Jane was to sign up and she lived in the Hunter Valley, she'd say, you know what, Sarah, I'd like a dozen eggs a week. I'd like to collect them from my favourite cafe, which is this one, and Jane has the opportunity then to go in any time that week, pick up those eggs. If those eggs aren't collected, by the following week I go back to replace them with fresh eggs. Those old eggs are then donated to a food charity, but that person has already paid for their eggs and it's up to them whether they collect it. It seems to be working. We're probably choosing not to scale at this stage, but that's a story for another day. What I'm hoping everyone here will walk away from today, and I'm hoping that it's relevant to a lot of people in the room, are two things. One, what are some of these key criteria that these excellent businesses are doing? And it was interesting in the travels to find that there are 3 or 4 sort of things that all these businesses are doing, and they're doing it really well. I'm also looking at these practical examples, and today I'm hoping to explain some of these practical examples that you or I could walk away from today and potentially look to apply to your business tomorrow. I'm a little bit nerdy when it comes to continuous improvement. I love Lean Six Sigma. Please, when we get to that section, don't try and start to stick needles in your eyes or anything like that. I've tried to keep it at a level that is really interesting, and to me, some of you will go, oh my God, that's so straightforward, and start poo-pooing the examples. I encourage you, if not challenge you, to sort of have an open mind to this and ask the question, actually, are we doing this on our farm and in our business? How could this add value to us? So, when we look at pursuing excellence, I'm going to speak about 4 businesses today. 2 of them are from the UK, 1 from the Netherlands and 1 from Japan. The 2 key critical criteria for these excellent businesses is 1, they have an absolute desire to be the best at what they do. I suspect there's a few people in the room here today that are in this category, if not all. And listening to Jack Milbank speak yesterday, it was a prime example, and I couldn't wait to catch Jack outside and ask him about some of these questions that we talked about with these businesses. Secondly, and possibly more importantly, these businesses are 100% absolutely obsessed with their customers. Not just delivering superior customer value, but actually successfully delivering that value. I think there'd be a lot of people in the room today me included, who think they've nailed what their customer wants. For me, what I learned from speaking and spending a lot of time with these guys and following up with a lot of calls afterwards, is it's taken them years to really, really understand what it is that their customer wants, desires and needs. And I hope that I can talk to a few of those points. The reason I believe that that's a critical issue is if you don't truly understand what it is your customer desires, it's really hard to also ask your customer what they might want. They find it very hard to often describe anything other than just a slight variant on what they're already receiving from you. I think one great example of that would be Henry Ford, who most here would have heard the saying that if Henry was to ask his customers what they were chasing, they would have said a faster horse. So from our perspective, it's actually we want to take that leap and move into a different paradigm. These excellent businesses do usually one of three things. This is actually, these three categories, it's not my model, it's taken from the Harvard Business Review from Tracy and Weisemer, but I took the model and I've actually tweaked the third section of it for the findings that I came up with. The first piece, super obvious, okay? Product leadership, you've got a great product that sets you apart from your competitors. I think we can say that most of the businesses that are included in this work do two of these three things. They all have product leadership. Secondly, one of the other options is customer intimacy. Customer intimacy, I'll go into a little bit more detail, and I'm actually going to focus on customer intimacy and operational excellence in this discussion. But this is where you really do start to understand what it is that your customer needs, wants, and in particular you start to anticipate those needs. Operational excellence. This is where I think this model could evolve a little bit, and I've tried to evolve it in my research. These guys focus purely on things like reliability and efficiency. I'm going to put a slightly different spin on it from my research and actually look at it from a cultural perspective, where businesses are looking to delight their customers and remove waste from their processes. By waste, I don't mean food waste, what's left over at the end of processing. Waste, I'll talk to you about non-value adding steps throughout the process. So let's have a look at customer intimacy. From a customer intimacy perspective, the three things that stood out, like whatever you want it to stand out like, for me, oops, that was almost a slip, were closeness to customer, choosing your customers, and emotional motivators. Closeness to customer is actually interesting. It's not the geographical distance, it's how intimate you are with your customer, how well you know your customer. The first photo we have up here is of a gentleman called Marcel Dings. He runs Brooksbury's Strawberries in the Netherlands. I really enjoyed meeting with Marcel and catching up with him a lot afterwards, because Marcel really has tried hard to get to understand what his customer desires, to the point where he's picking strawberries now. He's showing us examples of his strawberries now, but he'll choose obviously different products for certain markets. In a couple of slides' time, I'll show you how specific he was able to get with his Japanese market versus how general he's able to be with his European market. What Marcel actually goes on to say is obviously he wants to anticipate their needs, but he takes it one step further and he says he chooses his customers. He actually says no to a lot of people that come inquiring about his product and actually actively chooses to say no thank you. Main reason being, Marcel is chasing overall value rather than larger revenue growth from that perspective. He feels that his customers can offer things such as not just the revenue growth itself, but good ideas, introduction to new customers, collaboration, and actually one of the big ones for him was also social media. From that perspective, he was really starting to value customers that could increase his presence on the web. That second photo you've got there, one of our previous scholars yesterday, Sonia, spoke about visits to Dingley Dell. So this is Dingley Dell pork. You have a chef in the photo there holding a piglet. So over the course of a year, Dingley Dell encouraged, on average, 500 chefs to visit their farm every year. So 500 chefs is a lot of logistics to take care of, but they find it so important, again, so that when they can meet their customers and actually form that intimate relationship, They can make the decision as to whether they say yes or no when the customer approaches them, because no doubt it is actually the customer that approaches them for their product. They work on the philosophy of being pulled rather than, I think David Crombie was talking pull versus push Tuesday night, and Dingley Dell find this very important as well. The third photo, just in case you don't recognise the dude on the right, the guy on the right is obviously Jamie Oliver. The guy on the left is Paul Kelly. Paul Kelly is a UK Nuffield scholar. Has anyone, I think a couple of people here, does anyone study with Paul? Yes, we've got someone up the back here. He's a character. So I went out to visit Paul. He runs Kelly Bronze. It's a turkey business. I think his tagline is bred to be wild. Anyone want to have a guess, aside from the people that were in my practice session yesterday, how much he sells his turkeys for each year? Any thoughts? How much for a turkey for Christmas? 30 bucks? Any up or down on 30? 200. Yeah, okay, so someone's obviously met Paul. Yes, around that. Around $200 each for the turkey themselves. There's a brilliant story behind it, and it's a brilliant marketing story, it's a brilliant product story. I'd encourage you to get on the website and have that. I don't think we have time today to delve into it, but we're talking a premium product that is valued as a premium product. Paul appeals to the emotional motivators of customers, the fear of missing out. They've got FOMO. If I don't have a Kelly Bronze turkey at Christmas time, then I'm going to be perceived to be not doing the best for my family. He has this nailed, like to a T. It's absolutely brilliant. Haven't had the option to test the turkey out yet, but I have no doubt would also taste brilliant. If we keep on with the emotional motivators, one thing I found really interesting in the research we were looking at, and I think it was Marcel who actually suggested he tried to do this as well. He would much prefer to focus on those emotionally connected. So that column in the right, the emotionally connected customers are 2 to 3 times more valuable to you than the highly satisfied customers. The really interesting point I thought about the whole discussion with all of these guys was it might be so tempting to focus on unsatisfied customers and shift them to satisfied customers. Don't. From their perspective, I can't help it. Like if I get a phone call from one of my subscribers who's had a problem or complaining or something like that, if it's something we can fix and it's our fault, absolutely. But it's very tempting to try and solve everyone's problems and move them up the curve. Reality is they never become as valuable as those people that you can shift from highly satisfied to completely emotionally connected. Those guys and girls that are completely emotionally connected to your product, they buy more from you, they visit you more, probably more importantly, they exhibit less price sensitivity as well. So all good things that I think we as business people would love. Okay, now onto the topic that I think overlays all of this, and what I found intriguing, I think I set out with my research topic, I left Australia going, okay, I'm going to look for businesses that are already using like lean philosophies, so philosophies that the Japanese use in Toyota manufacturing. So that didn't really happen. What actually happened was you get to these excellent businesses that a lot of this stuff is a no-brainer, and by no means am I trying to make this out to be something absolutely fantastic and super hard to do, but a lot of it was common sense, but they had started to apply a few lean philosophies completely inadvertently. That's sort of how logical it is to these guys, and when they'd refined it, how obvious it is when we started to have these conversations. You realise that's this, and they're like, oh, super, I'm ahead of the curve. For me, the definition of OPEX or operational excellence is not just technical, it's a culture. It's a culture that you need to lead, you need to work on over the course of years to instill in your workforce and in your business. It's one where you're absolutely looking to focus and create customer value and delight your customers, but secondly, to minimise waste. Just to get a grasp of what I'm talking about when I talk about waste, because I think it can often be misinterpreted. If we thought about any process, turning up to your local cafe to get a cup of coffee from your local barista, heading outside here to line up for the lunch queue, anything Everything has steps in that process. Every step in that process is one of three things. It's a step that creates value. It's a step that creates absolutely no value but is 100% necessary or is necessary. And there's a pure waste. I think there's a really good example here, or a helpful example of explaining what I mean by something that adds no value but is absolutely necessary. We've got a Japanese engineer that many call the world's leading expert on manufacturing practice. He observed it's only the last turn of the bolt that tightens it. The rest is just movement. So from my perspective, when you start to put that hat on and you start to look at everything you're doing during your day, or for me, when I go and collect eggs, or if my team are collecting eggs, it's almost like this twitch now where you just can't help but like, whoa, hang on, why are we doing this? You have to ask the question, from a value perspective, is the customer willing to pay for this? You've got cows in the paddock, they're eating pasture, customers completely happy to pay for that. I'll talk to you in a couple of seconds, a couple of slides, around where there's some obvious waste, whether you were harvesting wasabi, harvesting cucumbers, cattle in feedlots, cattle out, your Bazadeh beef out in central Queensland. This is for everyone. This is not, if you think you're a commodity producer and this is not relevant to you, this is every step of what you do. This is the bit where most people go, oh my God, she wants me to map out my process. This is going to be so boring and kill me. What I'd suggest, yeah, you can go off and do a lot of training or get someone in that has a Lean Six Sigma background. I spent a couple of years with BHP and trained as a Lean Six Sigma black belt and loved it. Yeah, super nerd, really enjoyed it, and great fun. But you don't need to do all that to actually start to plot out, and it's just called a value stream. We don't need to get technical about it. It'd be fascinating, I reckon, for you to go out and shadow what your staff do. It's a little bit hard sometimes because they think you're just trying to shadow them to be like, okay, we're looking to get rid of you. If you do any of this sort of stuff, it's preface it with, we're not looking to get rid of anyone, and actually you don't. The whole point is, and they will have the best suggestions anyway, it's not about removing staff, it's about removing non-value added steps or removing waste from a process so that those guys or yourself can go and work on more valuable steps in the process. So if you were to plot out your process, I reckon you'd plot it out and you'd be like, yeah, sweet, this is how it goes. This is step A, B, C, D, E. In fact, there's actually step A, A.3, A.4, A.5, what actually happens day to day. This red and green bar up the top here is actually my team and me collecting eggs, packing eggs, getting eggs to our subscribers. The red being waste, steps that happen that we just would love to minimise or get rid of. The green being steps that we know our customers would be happy to pay for. If I was to take this more broadly and think about you or your business, if you were out to reflect on that, I would suggest to you, and the first one there where it says storage of grain in bins, necessary but no value, I'm referring to me with getting bulk feed in for chickens. It's absolutely necessary for us for a number of reasons, but reality is, if you were to take the Japanese model of just in time from an inventory perspective, you'd actually have the grain arriving much more close to the time that you actually require it, rather than having inventory sitting there with the potential for vermin, for the potential for moisture, for the potential for things to go wrong with that inventory. Same at the other end. I wouldn't say this is definitely not necessary, but this is waste. It was talking, producing cucumbers, you're producing, I used the wasabi example again, purely because you have to ask the question, when you're harvesting that product, is it sitting there in piles in inventory waiting to go to a customer? How long is it waiting there for? Does it have to be refrigerated? Should we be thinking about, are we able to not have it in the refrigeration? Can we get it straight into the customer, straight out the door, or straight into that next step of the process? These are all the sort of questions that I suspect people ask, but they don't always get down to the root cause as why are we actually doing this? The other pretty straightforward examples, and one that we saw a lot of in the Netherlands, was around the strawberries. It was fascinating. I just assumed you'd pack straight into the packaging it was going to, like the little punnets. And the guy we visited was absolutely doing that. But he was saying his competitors were actually packing into crates, like, pulling the straw or harvesting the strawberries straight into crates. Then those crates would move into a packing area, and then the strawberries would be packed from the crates into the punnets themselves. Two areas of waste there. You've got extra motion, people taking time to go and pack it into punnets, and secondly, the chance of the strawberries being bruised in the process and additional waste with the product being lost in that process. Here are the examples you're totally going to poo-poo, and you're like, Sarah, seriously, you travelled overseas to see this stuff? This, on the left-hand side, is just a basic shadow board. I'm assuming everyone here, because you're so organised, your farms run super smoothly, have shadow boards with all their tools hanging up. You know exactly where the spanner is, exactly where the hammer is, exactly where the shifter is. Not everyone does, okay? So, point being, give you an example. This Japanese tomato farmer, we were talking, and he was like, literally, we had to introduce this shadow board pretty quick because my guys would turn up. We'd have our 2-minute toolbox about safety, and then we'd get straight into the harvest. Yeah, so they would spend, you had 4 guys turn up, they'd spend 10 to 15 minutes trying to find the secateurs. They couldn't remember where the last guy left it from the shift handover. Eventually they'd find it. 4 people, 15 minutes, let's just say $30 an hour for rounding purposes, $200 a week, $10,000 a year looking for secateurs. Yeah, not ideal. That happens all the time. Second example here, colour, it's a harvest colour chart. Super basic again, but again is in the hort world. If you're looking at what size or what colour or whatever you need to harvest from, we do it with eggs as well, shape, size, when you're grading. If you can grade it or harvest it as the customer requires it, the time you're saving in not having to double handle it or repack later on is fabulous. The tomato colour was just written there, so any new employee could compare. Obviously after a few attempts, you're not so bad at it. You're only harvesting what's required. Again, another method of removing waste from your process. The final example there is actually from an egg farm. It's a small scale egg farm. Major thing there is it's a production control chart. It could be improved. It could actually be graphed. Most people respond better to visuals rather than numbers. And what they're doing here is they know any number under 350, they need to ask a question, hey, what's going on? And any of these little numbers in the top right-hand corners are eggs on the ground. Ground eggs, complete waste. Once they start hitting a certain number, you have to ask the question, what are we doing differently, or what are the chickens doing differently in that range? This is my final example before I just give you some brief takeaways. This again is our strawberry farmer Marcel. On the left-hand side is what Marcel sends to the Japanese market. On the right-hand side is what he sends to the European market. He gets a 30% premium for the Japanese market. He's been able to understand, meet with the Japanese, the actual end customers being the supermarkets, and understand what is it that you really want. Those supermarkets want 13 to 15 gram strawberries, all lined up in the same direction, on bubble wrap, inside the punnet. They need it in a certain amount of time as well. The one extra piece that they required, which was super interesting, was also Marcel, we really don't want any of those dead leaves in the punnet. Those tiny little brown leaves that sometimes end up in strawberry punnets? We can't have any of those. Our customers are too picky. So Marcel just set up literally black compressed air on top of the conveyor, a shot of compressed air, the leaves fly out, and he's now getting a 30% premium for that. On the right-hand side, it's going straight into punnets. As you can tell, the Europeans are a little less picky on what they would like in their strawberry, but any excess strawberry outside of the Japanese premium is sent straight to the European market. The main two things I took away from this and what I'll apply to my business, and I need to do much better, is really, really getting much closer with my customers and understanding that. And that involves, Paul Kelly from Kelly Bronze, he'll actually go and have a turkey with his customers around their kitchen table. From that, he understood that they weren't cooking his turkey properly, so now he includes a thermometer in their package with them and ways of best cooking the turkey itself. Also, if you have the opportunity, maybe choose one of your products, map your value stream, and go and hang out with, go and walk the floor. It's another Japanese term, where you get out there and actually have a look at what is happening with your product from start to finish, and I reckon you'll be a little surprised at the waste that'll start to jump out at you. But thank you very much.